Hey everyone, it's Alex the Real Mr. Robinson here, and this is my review for Christopher Robin, which is directed by Marc Forster, the same guy who did movies like Finding Neverland, which I love, Quantum of Solace, which I think is better than most people give it credit for, and World War Z, ugh. But this movie is a live-action extension, that they're calling it, of the Winnie the Pooh franchise that Disney started in 1977, which that itself was based off the Winnie the Pooh books by A.A. Milne and E.H. Shepard. And this is an extension in the sense that this movie follows an older Christopher Robin, who's played by Ewan McGregor, as he basically leaves the 100-acre wood at his childhood to go to boarding school, and then life catches up with him. He meets his wife, he has a kid, and he's suddenly stuck with his job that he hates. But he has to stay there in order to support his family, and one day he is forced to work over the weekend, which means he can't take his family to the countryside, and he promised both his wife and his daughter that they were going to go, but he can't do that anymore. And then suddenly things start to take an unexpected turn when Winnie the Pooh pops up in London, and from that point on, I'll just say that adventures ensue. So this is a really weird movie for me, not in terms of like the concept, but in the sense that I have two conflicting opinions on this movie. On one hand, I do have a lot of love and history for the Winnie the Pooh franchise. It was one of the big Disney franchises that I held on to as a kid and kept watching it until I got a little older. And I remember watching the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh, the original movie back in the late 70s. I loved the Saturday morning cartoon, The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, when I was a kid. And then the 2011 movie was really good as well. Even watching that as a 20-year-old at the time, it was actually really good, really clever, really funny, and just really faithful to what Winnie the Pooh was. So this is a weird movie because it is essentially a Winnie the Pooh movie in terms of all the characters and the fact that they're all faithfully adapted from what the animated counterparts were. But at the same time, this is part of Disney's trend of taking a lot of their animated properties and turning them to live action. So I wasn't too sure how to feel about it. And there are a lot of things in this movie that I ultimately don't like, but I feel like I enjoyed this movie more than I didn't. One thing I really love about this movie is that they basically took the animated stuff from Winnie the Pooh and combined it with the original books. All these characters are now in live action form, and the way they're designed and the way they pretty much transition into live action is a throwback to the original illustrations of those books, and it's something that makes it stand out from other live action interpretations, where they kind of take inspiration from the original source material rather than just completely adapting the animated movie. And all the scenes with Winnie the Pooh and the gang are really well done. And I do like Ewan McGregor as Christopher Robin. He has a good dynamic between Pooh and the other stuffed animals. And there's a lot of metaphors in this movie about basically losing your childhood and having to reclaim it through going back into the past and rediscovering your childhood. So Christopher Robin pretty much rediscovers what it's like to be a kid again and what it is to just have all these fun adventures with your friends. And it does lead to some very heartfelt scenes. And it's not really dependent on nostalgia 100%. I mean, there are points where it is, but I think it's effective enough without the nostalgic factor. Because honestly, after Ready Player One, as much as I still enjoy that movie, I'm kind of over the whole nostalgia thing. I'm like, just give me a good story with good characters, and that's all I care about. And for half of this movie, you do get that. But then we get into the other half of the movie, which is where I say this movie's weird, because I think it's overall okay. The stuff that I just talked about are the stuff that I loved about the movie, or liked. But the stuff that I'm going to talk about is stuff that I just don't like and cannot stand to a T. All the human stuff in London, and with Christopher Robin having to have his family take off so he can stay in London and work, is boring. The human characters are very dull. Hayley Atwell is in this movie as Christopher Robin's wife, and she's really good, but she isn't given a whole lot to do. She's just there to be the wife and to play part in this cliche in movies that I absolutely hate. This is my most hated cliche in all kinds of movies. Well, next to The Misunderstanding, but it's the Disney dad. This is a term when the family gets irritated about the father who's always working and can't spend enough time with his family. And this is a cliche that I thought we were past. I just cannot stand this cliche because every time I see a movie like this, especially considering the situation Christopher Robin is going through, it makes me want to go into the movie, look at Hayley Atwell and Christopher Robin's daughter and go, look, if he leaves his work, he's gonna lose his job, and that means no income comes in. So I'm sorry, it sucks, but he's gotta do what he's gotta do. And it just makes the movie feel very tired, very cliche, very outdated with this trend that I hate. And the last third of the movie, I honestly was not a big fan of. One of the things that kind of really bothered me is whenever Winnie the Pooh and the gang are in London. Now, the first bit of it, where it's just Pooh Bear in London, I'm okay with. But ultimately, once the other characters come in, you start to ask a lot of questions like, why are these stuffed animals alive? Because I had always thought that Winnie the Pooh and the gang were all of Christopher Robin's imaginary friends. But in this movie, I guess they're not. So it just leads to a lot of weird and cliched hijinks, which doesn't work out all the time. And the ending of the movie is just so downright cliche and so stupid. Like the very last scene, I'm okay with, but the whole resolution to the plot, I was not a fan of. Because it once again plays into the cliche of the Disney dad, and it's just so telegraphed. So before I actually give this a rating, I did want to talk about the voice work. You got Jim Cummings coming back as Winnie the Pooh and Tigger, and he's done Winnie the Pooh for decades. Ever since Sterling Holloway passed away, he's taken over the mantle of Winnie the Pooh, and he's always done a great job. And I also really like Brad Garrett as Eeyore. I thought he was just a perfect Eeyore, and a lot of the laughs in this movie came from him and just all the depressing stuff that he'd say, because that's the character of Eeyore. I mean, the movie does faithfully adapt all these characters from what we remember in the old days of the cartoons and the original movie, but for some reason you have a lot of other voice work that just doesn't sound like the original characters. More specifically with Rabbit and Owl. You could consider it a nitpick, and I'm sure some people will, but when you consider that the 2011 movie wasn't that long ago, and you had people like Tom Kenny voicing Rabbit and Craig Ferguson as Owl, I don't know why you could have brought him back. I mean, Tom Kenny is a voice actor. He's done a ton of voice work out there. Aside from SpongeBob, which is his most famous role, he's done stuff for Transformers. He's done stuff for Star Wars The Clone Wars. I've heard him do a lot of voice work in other properties. So it just boggles my mind why they didn't bring Tom Kenny back for Rabbit here. I don't know, it's weird. Half the voice work is good, then the other half is questionable. So on the whole, I really wish I could either love this movie with the stuff that I like, or hate this movie with the stuff that I don't like. So with all that, the movie just gets sorted down the middle of being okay. This is one of the more tolerable live-action Disney interpretations that they've done, but it still has a lot of issues. I feel like I like this movie more than I didn't, so ultimately, I'd say watch at your own risk. But this is more at the higher spectrum of watch at your own risk. If you have kids, if you have families and they want to go see this movie, you could take them. Especially for younger kids, I think there's something to be enjoyed. And I even think there are elements in this movie that adults can enjoy, like trying to rediscover your childhood. That's a really good theme. However, if you're looking for something a little better, a little more clever, and more imaginative, this is not the movie for you. My advice is just watch some of the other Winnie the Pooh stuff that Disney has made in the past. For example, when I was doing research for this review, I was watching old clips from the original Disney movie and the 2011 one, and I had just forgotten how clever and funny those movies were. So I just recommend The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and Winnie the Pooh over Christopher Robin. But this, it's tolerable, not the worst thing I've seen, but it definitely could be better. I will say, out of all the live-action remakes Disney has done, this is probably the second best. It still has problems, but at least they tried to do something different with the Winnie the Pooh series, rather than what they did with Beauty and the Beast, where they literally just copied and pasted the 1991 movie, or like they did with Alice in Wonderland, where it's so different from the source material that it's downright insulting. And that's my review for Christopher Robin. Now I want to hear from you guys. If you've seen the movie, what did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What's your exposure to Winnie the Pooh? Are you familiar with a lot of the older animated works that Disney has done, or the original books? Let me know in the comments down below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Go ahead, subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and of course leave a comment down below. Don't forget to support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.